Well, well, well. We are indeed back again. We should be, if I've done it correctly. Yeah, I can't say it's late tonight, but if I have done it correctly, we should be going. We should be cooking by gas. We should be live. And yeah, we are indeed back again. Only tonight, it's not just me. There is indeed free, and we do indeed have a special guest, which is, of course, like mentioned in the previous stream, Bart Sibrel, who is, of course, the author and filmmaker we all know of. We've had him on, what, mm, three times, four times? And I reckon, if I remember correctly, the first time I had him on, we got a strike. So we'll need to be on the careful side. But hey, it is what it is. We know what YouTube are like. Yeah, we know the game that we're in. Of course, there's yeah, with a history there. Personally, terminated twice and more strikes than a I don't know a baseball player. So we are indeed back again. We've got Bart on. We'll do a bit of questions, cover a bit of stuff, see what Bart's been up to, and well, since last time we spoke, which I reckon was about 2 years ago now. Surely about that, but we can we can maybe remember because we do indeed also have our kind of co-host, co-anchor, if you like, the one and only Sensum. And I will indeed bring in the man himself, Bart Sibrel, who is with us tonight. Can you hear us okay, Bart? Are you good to go?
No, I can't hear you at all.
Ah, wait, I don't buy it.
Wait a minute. Then how did I answer the question?
I don't believe it. I know a lie when I see it.
All right.
It's great to have you back on. And can you hear us okay, Sensum? Are you good to go?
Yeah, I can hear everybody fine. I hope you can hear me okay. Yeah,
Yep.
it's great. It's an utter privilege once again to have Mr. Sibrella on the chat. So it's great stuff.
Yep. Cool. So, like I said, we've spoke maybe three or four times in the past. We discussed your the book that you wrote, Moon Man in particular, which I thought was a fascinating book, a great book. I did actually give it the original copy that I had. I did give it to a friend as well. So I've passed it on. I've done my kind of good deed, and they'll now spread the word and share. I tend to do that with books. To be fair, I'll read it and then I'll pass it on. So we touched on that. A fascinating book, like I said. Um, we did cover quite a lot of stuff in regards to Apollo. We covered a lot actually when I looked back. Quite surprising the amount of stuff we did cover. So it's great to have you back on and know that you're open to discussing different topics. We talked about the future, the past, the whole 2020 scenario. We might not go down that route, but who knows? You never know where it goes. But since maybe 2 years ago, you did go on Joe Rogan, and you also, well, I don't know if you want to call it a debate. You debated the guy Charlie Duke in the past on, I think, Danny Jones, which was a fascinating watch. I felt. But in terms of the Joe Rogan interview, how do you think that went, and what's your kind of summary on the outcome of it?
Well, it was kind of hard to tell for me. They say you can't see your face or your nose because of your face, or you can't see the forest for the trees, something like that. The person involved may not be the most objective person. I can tell you what the experience was like. Originally, I was in Los Angeles, I think around 2000, and I was working with Fox on a TV special called Conspiracy Theory: Did We Land on the Moon? And originally, they were going to broadcast my film. A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, which your listeners can watch for free on the homepage of Sibrel.com. That's S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL, Sibrel.com. And then their legal department freaked out because we weren't presenting both sides of the story. I'm saying the moon missions were faked, and that's what I said for 45 minutes. My opinion is, well, we've heard their side of the story for 50 years. They don't need equal time. We're the ones who need equal time. So they decided instead to produce a show with me as the consultant and one of the people they interviewed about it using some of my footage. At that time, when I was in LA, I received an email from Joe Rogan who said, if you're ever in LA, let me know. I'll take you out to dinner. I said, well, I happen to be here this week. So he took me out to dinner and said that he firmly believes the moon missions to be fake. What can he do to help? And nothing much came of that conversation. And of course, he started a podcast many years later. And many people asked for years, why haven't you had Bart Sibrel on there? You talk about the moon landing fraud from time to time, but don't have the number one critic thereof on your program. So he eventually contacted me and flew me out to LA. And I'm sorry, not LA. Where is he located? Austin. And we did a 3-hour exhaustive interview about it. I was kind of tired from traveling, which might have worked to my advantage because I was a little bit lower key. I tend to be overly enthusiastic and argumentative. And I remember watching a lawyer perform in court once, and he was so mild mannered and soft spoken. I thought that was actually more effective. So maybe my tiredness from travel, maybe that helped. But he basically pretended for 3 hours that he, believed we went to the moon or something like that. He was being critical of everything that I said. When we took a bathroom break about halfway through, I'm like, what are you doing? You're the one who contacted me saying, the moon missions are fake. What can you do to help? Why are you acting like you think they went? He said, well, this is for a new generation of people who don't know about the argument. And for their benefit, I'm doing it this way. Trust me. So I'm like, okay, it's your show. But maybe he was right. On the homepage of Sibrel.com, there's a quote. In fact, why don't I just read it? I got it here on another monitor. It says, if you still believe we landed on the moon and our astronauts walked on its surface in 1969 after reading this book, that's the book that I wrote, I don't know what to say. Prior to watching Joe Rogan interview Bart Sibrel regarding the Apollo 11 mission, I firmly believed the story. I never questioned its authenticity. Suddenly, the lie became so clearly obvious, and I delved further into the topic. That's why I read this book, and it only further confirmed that the whole Apollo mission was one big hoax. While Mr. Sibrel belabors some points excessively, perhaps that is what's necessary to get the truth to sink in. And yeah, there's like one kind of catchphrase. The editor of the book says, I say way too many times. He trimmed it down, and I'm still, told that I'm repeating this one point, over and over again. But even though that he criticized that, he also understood why he did it. Perhaps that's what's necessary to get the truth to sink in. So people are going along in their life. They assume, like I did, the moon missions are real. They see the concept that maybe they falsified it on Joe Rogan. The evidence is pretty simple. There's much more proof that they faked it than they really went. We have really 4 times the proof. I think we went into that on previous shows. And the average viewer is like, wow, you're right. They did fake the moon landing. The guy gets my book anyway, Moon Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list. Again, it's at Sibrel.com in audio that I read myself, Kindle or print. And he said after reading it, he's even more convinced that they did indeed fake the moon landings. The book is interactive with about 15, 17 video links. I basically write a chapter and then I say, go to Sibrel.com, click on link 1, look at the movie, because in the next chapter we're going to talk about the movie, and then click on the next video link because we're going to talk about that. Some of it are films that I've made, other is video evidence that proves conclusively the sad fact that they did fake the moon landing. One of the mantra that I repeat is really the logic, how without looking at any moon rock or any photograph, you can in your own mind through a thought experiment prove the moon missions are fake. NASA has never kept a schedule. I mean, they say we're going to do this by this date. They've said they're going to return to the moon 10 times. They said we're going to return to the moon in 5 years. They've said it 10 times. They've never done it. Okay. They said in 2014, we're going to have people orbiting the moon in 2018. And 2022, right, 4 years behind schedule, they had mannequins orbiting the moon, right? Okay. So somehow Kennedy can go from, never being in space, not a single astronaut being in space, setting a goal to walk on another world in 8 years with 1960s technology that's never been used before. And he can walk in another world and with an 8-year goal being accomplished. And now, 50 years later, with 50 years greater rockets and computers, they said in 2014, we're going to have people orbit the moon, not even land, which is so much more complicated because you got to land and then take back off again. And it takes 50% more time with 5 decades better technology just to orbit the moon, assuming they do it in the next few weeks, like they claim they're going to do. Even if they do it in the next few weeks, it's taken 50% longer with 5 decades greater technology to do 1/10 of the mission. So the only time NASA has ever kept a schedule, ever, in their entire history, is the most complicated mission of all time. With 1/1,000th the computing power of a cell phone, they said they went on the first attempt ahead of schedule 1,000 times farther into space than they can go today with an astronaut, where they can only travel 1,000th the distance to the moon today, even with 5 decades better technology. So you can't have greater technology in the past and in the future. That would be like Lindbergh saying in 1927, he flew 3,000 miles over the Atlantic, and 55 years later, in 1982, not a single airplane on Earth from a single nation can fly over the Atlantic, and the greatest airplane 55 years later can only fly 3 miles. That's the exact equivalent. So we've proved it logically that you cannot have greater technology in the past and in the future. Just after the atomic bomb was blown up for the first time, 10 years later, they were 1,000 times more explosive. Do you understand? So if they could go to the moon with 1960s technology on the first attempt, we would have been on Mars 10 years later. We'd be in another solar system right now. There'd be bases all over the moon. They couldn't even reach the South Pole on Earth on the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth attempt. It took 6 attempts, killing 5 crews first, just to reach the South Pole on Earth. You see? So anyway, there's the logic. That's the Joe Rogan experience. And I guess that's opened other people's minds. I've also did Candace Owens' interview after that. And to my surprise, she said she's always known that the moon missions were fake. And I ended up doing InfoWars while I was in Austin. And they did fake the moon landing. I mean, I used to not only believe they were real, I worshiped virtually the moon missions. I was a super fanboy with Apollo 11 memorabilia all over the wall and every home wherever I lived. And to go from that to being the greatest critic, it's only the truth that could convert me. And if it weren't for the fact that it's a positive lie, giving people something positive, their team won the Super Bowl or the World Cup, they would see it for the deplorable lie that it is. But it's like taking candy away from a baby, and people would rather believe the lie.
Yeah.
Could I just, I would just very much like to say also, for anybody who, first of all, hasn't read the book Moon Man or watched the video, please do so. But one classic indictment, which isn't even technology based or science based, is the fact that when you wanted to try and bring this to the public's eye, the CIA literally went all out to suppress you, much to the event where they, that your life was in danger, basically. And I do remember the tale of you going to, I can't remember if it was CNN studios, but a taxi driver literally standing up for you. And, you know, had that guy not done so, you know, things could have turned out very differently. So even if people don't want to believe the scientific argument or, you know, the photographic argument or anything else, why was the CIA so hell-bent on suppressing what you wanted to provide to the news organizations, you know?
Well, yeah, that's a good question as well. I made a supplemental film, the first film, the one that has proof on camera of them faking part of the moon mission with the third track of audio of the CIA telling them how to fake it better. That's on the homepage of Sibrel.com. That film is called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. After that film came out, I had the idea of just tracking down Apollo astronauts and seeing if they would swear on the Bible, whether they walked on the moon or not. And one occasion, I was in the home of, I think his name is Edgar Mitchell, and we put up a TV monitor and we showed him the fake footage of them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes. It's what convinced me and two NBC news directors and a Washington Post reporter that the moon missions were indeed falsified. He turned beet red and he literally assaulted me, kicked me from behind on the way out. And in the commotion, we left a wireless microphone on him, pretty good quality. And my camera operator was so flustered, he forgot to hit stop record. So while the beta camera, whatever we were using, was in the back seat of the rental car, we were recording the private audio inside the house of the Apollo astronaut and his son with the door closed. And months later, when the film secretary did a transcript of the interviews, she calls me up frantic and says, "Bart, do you know what they're talking about on the tape before you U-turn to go back and get your $800 microphone?" And I'm like, "I don't know what." She says, "They're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed." And I said, "That's pretty funny." She said, "No, Bart, they're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed." I said, "That's pretty funny." She says, "Bart, you're not listening. They're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed." So I get out the tape, put it in, bring up that audio channel, and sure enough, they're talking about calling the CIA to have me killed, which, as you pointed out, would not be necessary if they really went to the moon. Because why would the CIA care if I'm saying, the moon missions are fake and they really went? Why would they bother? And as you know, if I skip ahead to the fourth proof that's in my book, but not in the film, we have an eyewitness who, as he was dying, fearing the judgment of God, confessed first to a murder. He was the chief of security at the United States' most secure base, their intelligence division. My source at NASA, who told me the moon missions were fake before I even believed it, said that the faking thereof was supervised by the United States Air Force. Now, every branch of the military, the Navy, Army, Air Force, has an intelligence special ops division. That division for the Air Force is at Cannon Air Force Base, where my source, Cyrus Eugene Akers, was the chief of security. As he's dying, fearing the judgment of God, he says, "I want to confess I killed somebody back in 1968. His son is like, "Dad, dear old dad is a murderer." And he said, "Well, who did you kill?" He said, "Well, a coworker at Cannon Air Force Base." So the son brings in the military police to investigate, to give the family of the victim closure. And when they ask him, "Why did you kill him?" he said, "Well, that's where they filmed the fake first moon landing, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. My friend thought it was morally wrong. He was going to tell the public, and I killed him to keep it a secret." The guy goes on to testify that President Johnson personally showed up the first of 3 days of filming, gave him a list of 15 VIPs who were allowed in to observe. Neil Armstrong is on the list. Buzz Aldrin is on the list. They weren't even in the spacesuits. They had doubles. And he kept that list as his private souvenir, and we published it in the book. Some of these people are still alive. So we know exactly where they filmed it, when they filmed it, and who was there. from a guy's deathbed testimony, which a courtroom considers twice as powerful as an eyewitness testimony, because what has the person got to lose? Why would they make up such an absurd thing as they're dying? And then, of course, we have photographic evidence. Go to the homepage of Sibrel.com. You'll see shadows lit by the sun are always parallel. It's impossible for them to intersect. And some of the Apollo pictures have shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart, indicating electrical light, which means they're on Earth, which means they didn't go to the moon. In fact, on the homepage of Sibrel.com, we have a pretty recent story about the smartest AI in the world. Not available to the public. It's 10 AIs hooked up together. That was at a special AI conference only for VIPs. And we're talking about presidents of nations were the people allowed in and their staff. One, you could play with it for like 3 days. One team had it write a symphony, took a couple of seconds. Another one had it write a novel, took a couple of seconds. And one of them took advantage of its deep fake detector program, which has never been wrong. You can feed it a video of Biden or Trump. It'll tell you in 1 second whether it's real or not. They fed it pictures of the lunar surface from the unmanned Chinese probe from 2018. It said it's really the surface of the moon. And then in comparison, it fed them pictures from the Apollo missions of the Nixon administration. It said every single one had a fake backdrop, meaning it's a TV studio, which means they're on Earth, which means they didn't go to the moon. You see that? Somehow they can play golf and drive cars on the moon with 1 millionth computing power cell phone on the first attempt. And with 5 decades better technology, the best they can do is to have mannequins orbit the moon. You see? So I don't know what to say. I wish the moon missions were real. We'd live in a better world and have a better country, but we need to face facts. If we have cancer, and if we don't, the cancer is going to kill us.
Yeah, I think, am I right in thinking that I'm sure on Apollo 8, the original plan was to orbit the Earth, and then they changed it to, well, we're going to orbit the moon and come back to Earth. So they jumped, there was a big jump, and of course it was the first time orbiting the moon, and that was completely flawless, except maybe one glitch. They said Jim Lovell typed in the wrong commands to the computer, but they managed to fix it. It was okay. So it might have been a kind of dummy run for Apollo 13 scenario. But
Well, actually,
yeah,
they never left Earth orbit.
yeah.
That was a false mission. Okay, they faked walking on the moon, and they faked orbiting the moon. And we know this because the footage we uncovered shows the crew of Apollo 11, the alleged first crew on the moon, faking being halfway to the moon from Earth orbit. The tape is dated 3 days into the flight. It says at the very beginning of the reel, do not show to the public. And they're using a 1-foot model of the Earth to pretend it's the Earth floating in space. And there's a third track of audio of the CIA telling them to fake a 4-second radio delay to make it appear that they're beyond Earth orbit. The lights come up, they're using a fake model of the Earth, and the Earth is completely filling the window outside, proving they're still in Earth orbit. So they all had identical equipment. So if your 1969 Volkswagen Bug can't go over 100 miles per hour, none of them could. In fact, on this raw footage that we have, they say when they're faking being halfway to the moon, this is the way 10 did it. Meaning Apollo 10, which allegedly orbited the moon, also faked being halfway to the moon from Earth orbit. They can't leave Earth orbit, which means Apollo 8 didn't leave Earth orbit, Apollo 10 didn't leave Earth orbit. None of the Apollo equipment left Earth orbit. But they're trying to convince us that they could. So naturally, you would do incremental increases if you really were going to the moon. First, you would orbit the Earth, and on later missions, you would orbit the moon, and on later missions, you would land. If they were faking the moon mission, which they were, it's my opinion that they would make it genuine up to the point where they couldn't do anymore. Meaning, for all we know, they could have landed on the moon, but for some reason couldn't get out. The spacesuits wouldn't work. So I believe they would have made everything genuine except the moonwalk. Maybe they could have orbited the moon but not landed. Then we would have real orbiting footage. But what we have is fake footage of them being halfway to the moon, proving they cannot leave Earth orbit. And with lots of research, we find out we have the writings and a video statement from von Braun, the rocket designer, saying the largest rocket that mankind can build can only achieve Earth orbit. In order to orbit the moon, you have to have multiple fuel trips of fuel to a fuel station first. Elon Musk just published an article. His rocket can allegedly carry twice the fuel as the Apollo rocket, and he says it's going to take 15 trips minimum, or 30 times the fuel of a single Apollo rocket, to have enough fuel to land on the moon and come back. So they don't have enough fuel to leave Earth orbit. They don't have protection from radiation, which we have a clip of at Sibrel.com. A NASA technician whose specialty is the space radiation, saying the technology necessary to go through the radiation to the moon and back has not been invented yet as of 2014. So that certainly means they didn't go to the moon any time before them if the technology to do so hasn't been invented yet as of 2014. So, and then landing on the moon, you'd have micrometeorites. You'd have to somehow air condition the lunar module. And they claim they did it on a bunch of car batteries, which is why they destroyed all the telemetry data, all the schematics, all the blueprints from all the equipment, because later you could prove mathematically, scientifically, it couldn't do what it claimed. So they destroyed it all, which you would never do if you really went to the moon. But that's exactly what you would do if you perpetrated a fraud. So there's more proof there.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah,
I
but
guess
in terms of
whoever's going to hit the road soon.
yeah, in terms of Apollo 8, I mean that was to cancel the around the Earth orbit and then go straight to orbit in the moon and do it first time, flawless, similar to Apollo 11 is like so remarkable. I mean, you can't believe it. And you're right. And I also kind of thought, and you've touched on this many, many times, any kind of engineering achievement or feat never needs to be constantly uh, put out there that it did happen, it did happen, do you know, constantly reaffirmed like we tend to see year in, year out, different channels and platforms and NASA and organizations coming out to try and debunk people who are against any of the NASA narrative, and it's continuous, constantly. And I think probably a lot of money is spent on that kind of uh, campaign to try and reaffirm this. But why would you need to continuously reaffirm something that happened? I mean, what's the big idea there? Why do they feel the need to continuously do it?
Well, it's an emotional need. It's like me calling their grandfather a Nazi and they're offended. And so they'll dig up, well, here he is at a daycare center. Here he is giving, a donation to a Jewish charity. Here he is, no, no, no. Grandfather was not a Nazi. But what if he was? You see what I'm saying? They have this emotional need to defend it. People have this emotional need. They worship science. They worship space travel. I talked to a college professor who teaches aerospace at one of the United States' most prestigious universities. He said if he saw Neil Armstrong confess on national TV that the moon missions were fake, he would still think he walked on the moon anyway. I mean, that's a guy teaching university. He thinks he knows better as a child watching it on his living room floor than the guy who was there, because he's made a god out of it and refuses to accept the facts. He said so out of his own mouth. If Neil Armstrong confessed that the moon missions were fake, he would still think he walked on the moon anyway. That's not objective. If they really went to the moon, then there would be no need. I mean, there must be about 1,000 YouTube videos, 1,000, to reassure people that the moon missions are real. Now, if I went around saying Mickey Mouse was the first president of the United States and not George Washington, do you think there'd be 1,000 videos out there to reassure people? No, it was George Washington, and here's the proof why. They're defending it as if it's made out of straw because it's made out of straw, right? I did some interview and the guy showing me this debunking video. I've never seen a single debunking video because I've done decades of research and they did fake the moon mission. We have them faking it right in front of your eyes that even my critics agree is them faking part of the moon mission, which they would never do if they really went, duh. And so the guy showing me this debunking video, I'm looking at the time on it. It's 2.5 hours long. And I'm thinking, okay, so if they really walked on the moon, the amount of evidence I have to the contrary is 0. So how long should the debunking video be? 0 minutes and 0 seconds. So why is it 2.5 hours long trying to beat down like a defense attorney of a guilty client, beat down the evidence? They wouldn't even bother. Why would they even bother? Why did Charles Duke fly, and go through 2 airport changes to debate somebody who says the moon missions are fake? If I climb Mount Everest, okay, and risked my life and sweated and got frostbite or whatever, and that's what I'm known for, Bart climbed Mount Everest, and some guy somewhere says I shot it in a TV studio with the green screen, would I fly and go through 2 airport exchanges to debate whether or not I climbed Mount Everest? Of course not. The fact is, after I did the Joe Rogan interview and people are waking up to the truth that they did fake the moon mission, they pulled Buzz Aldrin back because he's inadvertently said the moon missions were fake one too many times. And they bring out this guy who's a better liar. The reason why he's there is to put out the fires of the truth. And because if they really went to the moon, there'd be no need for him to be there. But he is there to reassure people. I asked him, do you have a security clearance? He says, yes. I said, well, what level? He said, top secret. So why is an Apollo astronaut on a civilian mission have top secret clearance? And then I said, okay, so just to make me understand what that means you cannot tell your wife, your children, your pastor, or your church congregation the truth, correct? He said, well, yeah, I have to keep secrets from them too. So you'd lie to your wife, you'd lie to your children, you'd lie to your pastor, and you'd lie to your church congregation in order to serve the corrupt federal government. Is that right? Yes. Well, there you go. So the guy's a liar, and I guess he's lying about being a Christian too. I guess he thinks if he stamps, the Used Car Association of America on a used car, somehow that's going to help us buy it more. And the fact is, 3/4 of the New Testament is rebuking people who claim to be saved, telling them they're not saved unless they repent. And he's no different. The vast majority of people who think they're Christians are not, according to the Word of God. Jesus says, why do you call me Lord and not do what I say? Because the Bible rebukes people who live and practice a lie. They rebuke it a lot. And the guy lives and practices a lie. It's second nature to him. Of course, if you watch the 3-4 hour interview, he repeats the same mantra and over again that he's been using, for 55 years. And after saying the same 4 things 10 times, it becomes a little bit shallow there. But in any case, that's what's going on. The government is going to continue to lie like a person who got their hand caught in the cookie jar, a child. And it just proves the immaturity of our leaders. In fact, the faking of the moon landing proves their immaturity. Kennedy set a goal, it couldn't be reached. Why not just admit it, right? People don't understand that decade of world leaders were atrocious. According to Bobby Kennedy Jr., his uncle, President Kennedy, with 100% certainty from his research, which is greater than Oliver Stone's research, he says with 100% certainty the CIA killed their own president because he was going to shut down the agency. And then Johnson come along, he rescinds the closing the Vietnam War, wants to open it back up. And Robert McNamara, defense secretary, says, well, be careful here because the public is against us. And he says, if we could only come up with something like Pearl Harbor, because a day before Pearl Harbor, 90% of Americans didn't want to enter World War II. And a day later, 90% wanted to get even. So he admitted before he died that they invented an attack from a North Vietnamese ship on an American ship in the Gulf of Tonkin that caused Congress to pass a law, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, to start a war that killed 3 million people, including 58,220 of their own soldiers. And he said later, before he died, it never happened. We made it up. So how can we have representatives when they're voting to start wars based on lies of the CIA? So if they're willing to kill their own president, willing to kill their own soldiers, they're not going to have a problem faking a video image, right? It's only that it's a positive lie, a flattering lie that people don't want to give it up. I would rather be wrong. The good thing about being wrong is you're not walking around in error and you're learning something new. God says he opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. Pride is the unwillingness to be wrong. And America has developed an extremely arrogant, prideful society that is expanding upon itself. It's like being imitated at every level. I went into a 7-Eleven type store a couple of years back, and the cashier's barking out orders to me. Wipe your feet on the mat. Don't use that cup. Use this cup. No, don't do that. Do this. I thought I was the customer and I was the boss. You see how inverted it is? At every level of society, people are just so arrogant. Had a maintenance guy at my building, thought he was a genius. I'm the best maintenance guy here. I've been here the longest. Every single time he fixed something, he had to go back a second or third time and actually fix it. But he thought he was the best in the world. And that's our society. They think they can put a man on the moon in 1969, and they can't even have people orbit the moon 55 years later, right? I mean,
Yeah,
come on.
I think Apollo 8 would have been Jim Lovell, Frank Borman, and Bill Anders. Did you interview any of them three?
Yeah, I interviewed Bill Anders. It's in Astronauts Gone Wild. You can see that on the homepage of Sibrel.com. And I said we have footage of them faking Earth orbit. I'm sorry, faking lunar orbit. And he goes, oh, that's just silly. But it's like a conditioned response. You can tell his mantra. And the fact is, he did fake lunar orbit, and they faked it again in Apollo 10. And in the footage we have of them faking lunar orbit or being beyond Earth orbit a third time, they even say Apollo 10 faked it the same way, because these are private conversations that would later be edited out. And we found the unedited classified reel that says at the beginning, do not show to the public. So we see how they're faking it. We have a third track of audio telling them to fake a 4-second radio delay. You hear NASA say hello. Then there's 4 seconds of dead air. You hear his private channel talk. And then Neil Armstrong speaks, because he's pretending to be halfway to the moon, some 150,000 miles out. And they estimated 2 seconds for the radio signal to go out, 2 seconds to come back. And if he answered right away, it would give away the fact that he's only 250 miles above the Earth, where the space station is today. So they had him wait 4 seconds, and they told him not to speak until he receives the prompt to do so. And we have that clear as day on the homepage of Sibrel.com, as well as the 1-foot model that they claim is the Earth floating in space, and the lights come up, and it's really a 1-foot model of the Earth. And when you see it, it's like, oh my gosh, they actually did fake the moon landing. Like I said, 2 NBC News directors agreed it proved they didn't go to the moon. They were going to broadcast it nationwide until they received a threatening phone call from the federal government not to do so. They did fake the moon landing. I wish the missions were real. It'd be a better world and a better country, but we have to face facts. And this is the type of government we have. This is the type of world we live in. And if you think about that famous saying, the truth will make you free, then that means lies make us slaves. What better way to have a bunch of slaves is to trick them into thinking they're free? And that's the American Republic we have today.
Yeah, I don't think many people would argue with that, to be fair. I don't think anyway. Yeah. So, and did you interview Jim Lovell at all? Or Frank
I don't
Borman?
think we have Jim Lovell
No.
on camera. We couldn't track him down. We tracked down 8 of the Apollo astronauts. And that's one of the clips at Sibrel.com. Astronauts Gone Wild was the name of the second film, because one astronaut punched me, one astronaut kicked me, one astronaut threatened to shoot me, and one hot microphone has them talking about calling the CIA to have me killed, which wouldn't be necessary if they really went to the moon and I'm some silly person who thinks it was done at Cannon Air Force Base. The flight director told me that even a person in the command center at Houston Control during a launch can tell no difference whatsoever between a quote rehearsal flight and a quote real flight. It's just a bunch of numbers going by on a screen. So if they can't tell and they're in the command center, how are we going to tell? No independent press coverage, only 3 eyewitnesses, and we have to just take their word for it. And people wanted to believe it. People wanted their team to win the Super Bowl. People wanted something to cheer about during the Vietnam War, and they gave it to them like bread and circus. People swallowed it, and now you try to take that back 50 years later, and they're defending lies. They're defending criminals. And not only that, in my book, which is at Sibrel.com, I interview the widow and a son of a former Apollo astronaut who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon, but wouldn't cooperate with the fraud and was murdered by the
Gus
CIA,
Grissom?
according to his own wife and son.
Was that Gus Grissom by any chance?
Yeah, that's Virgil Grissom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, because obviously you didn't get chance to, because of his untimely death, you didn't get chance to interview Gus Grissom. But I'd be of a couple of questions I did have to ask you. When you interviewed Mrs. Grissom and the family, what did you make of the the events that led up to Gus Grissom's death? What did you make of those?
Well, I interviewed Betty Grissom for about 4 hours, and she told me that on January 26, 1967, her husband telephoned her from NASA and said, "Hun, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad today." He said he'd been at NASA for 6 years and he's never seen the CIA there a single time. Why, he asked, did they show up today to inspect the equipment? The very next day, he was dead from faulty equipment. A couple of weeks earlier, without permission, he took a bunch of reporters to the top of the rocket where he affixed a lemon the size of a grapefruit. And he called the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon, he called the moon rocket a piece of junk, a lemon, without permission. This infuriated his superiors. He received death threats from people in the federal government. He was actually under Secret Service whistleblower protection the day he died. They're willing to kill their own people to cover up the moon landing fraud. Cyrus Eugene Akers admitted he killed somebody to cover up the fraud.
Yeah.
Then there's Ronald Barron, who was investigating the Apollo 1 murder, and they killed him. What a coincidence. And then there's 4 other backup crews of Apollo astronauts who had fatal accidents all within a 24-month period. So that's 4 plus 3. You have 7 astronauts, Apollo astronauts, dying in accidents within a 24-month period.
I
I mean,
do
come on,
remember.
you know.
Sorry, Mr. Sibrel. I do remember alongside Gus Grissom there was a chap. I can't remember his first name. White. He was another one of the team that was killed in that particular incident. So, I mean, they weren't vociferous against what we would call the regime today. It was Gus, and yet they still felt vindicated in taking out 2 other people's lives. It wasn't like they targeted Gus Grissom and he had an accidental road accident or anything else. He you know, he basically burned to death, didn't he, in the capsule alongside his 2 fellow astronauts
Yeah,
that
they
day.
killed the other 2
Both the day.
people along with
Yeah,
him to make it look like they weren't singling him out, because
yeah,
everybody
yeah,
in NASA knew that he was a whistleblower. And like you said, had he had his own little fatal accident by himself, it would be obvious that it was a homicide.
yeah.
So they killed 2 other guys with him to blend it in and make it more look like an accident. But it wasn't, according to the dead man's widow and son, who's a 747 pilot, who says he has forensic evidence that that fire was set intentionally by the CIA, who mysteriously showed up the day beforehand for the first time ever at NASA. And that's pretty serious. We have not only the federal government taking our money, which they told us was going to be to go to the moon, and they fake it and keep, who knows, 80% of the money for who knows what. And then our tax dollars also pay the salaries of CIA agents who murder people, our fellow Americans who are going to expose their crimes. My source is Cyrus Eugene Akers, the man who confessed to eyewitnessing the faking of the moon landing at Cannon Air Force Base, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. He himself said he killed a coworker to cover it up. So there are numerous homicides about this. And the first document of America is not the Constitution, it's the Declaration of Independence, which says when any government, and any means any government, becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. So we have the United States of America killing their own people. They are objective to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life is the first one. So that enables the people the right to abolish or alter the federal government. They're running rampant. What we have here is a case like we live in a subdivision and one child disappears every 30 days and it's been going on for 55 years. And everyone's going, well, it's just one of those things you got to live with. I disagree. You have the federal government faking moon landings, killing their own people to cover it up, and some Americans naively defending those very criminals because it's a positive, flattering lie. That needs to stop, or these people will continue to do that and worse. When someone robs a bank and steals $1 million, they steal $2 million the next time, $5 million the next time, and $10 million the next time. They killed Kennedy. They faked the beginning of the Vietnam War. They faked the moon landing. They murdered people to cover it up. According to 3,000 engineers and architects, they did 9/11. They say it's impossible for a pinhole airplane going in and out of a grid to cause its collapse. Look at Oklahoma City bombing photograph. Half the building blown away, still didn't collapse. So a pinhole going through it isn't going to do anything. That's their opinion. They're the experts, not me, and yet nothing done about it. If they expose the moon landing fraud, the people in the government who really want to change things, that would be the most powerful tool to bringing down the corruption. People have this moon landing burned in their hearts, and maybe it killed fewer people than other crimes. They say the Kennedy assassination witness list was like 200 people, to keep that a secret. Maybe the Apollo fraud killed 20 people, but it's different. It's burned in their hearts. They cheered, they waved their flag, they cried, they prayed, they gave them ticker tape parades and medals of honor for being such good liars and traitors. If that truth comes out, that will enrage people, I believe, more than who shot JFK. And it will cause reform in the federal government. And without the truth coming out, it can only get worse. So we have to cut off that gangrene limb, which will be messy. But if we don't, the whole body's going to die.
Yeah. And just going back to Charlie Duke, was that the first time you'd spoke to him? I think you said you had a chat with him 20 years ago because he mentioned it in the interview or pre-interview.
Yeah, there are about 5 times during that interview he acted like he had no idea that I'm the guy who said we didn't go to the moon. When 1 minute before the recording started, he reminded me word for word of a private phone conversation we had 20 years earlier. And then Danny Jones told him 10 times that he would be, debating me who says we didn't go to the moon. Danny Jones even coached him on how to respond to my answers, which he probably shouldn't have done if he wanted to be a moderator. And how many times did Danny Jones interrupt and answer questions that I asked the astronaut? I asked him difficult questions multiple times, and Danny Jones multiple times answered and argued for the astronaut. When the event happened after the guy was, before the guy was even born, and if they really went to the moon, why would he? Why would the guy need any help? So the fact that he needs Danny's help is proof that they didn't go. Because if he went, he wouldn't need it. And Danny is a good person. He was just afraid his show would turn into the Jerry Springer show, and so he was overly protective of the guy. And yet 5 times during the interview, he acted like he had no clue. Well, that means he's deliberately lying because he reminded me right before a recording started that I was the guy who said we didn't go to the moon. Danny told him 10 times and even coached him how to respond to the guy who said we didn't go to the moon. So the fact that he acted like he didn't know that 5 times is just proof he's an intentional liar.
Yeah, I thought that was quite incredible. So, because he painted a picture that he never knew what he was walking into. So, a wee bit like he was there under false pretense, but clearly he knew where he was going and what he was doing, right? Surely.
Oh, yeah. Danny told me he had 10 conversations with him and even coached him on how to respond to my accusations, the point about the shadows, or the point about technology being greater in the past and in the future for the first time in history. He went through meticulously all of the points that I would make, coaching him on how to respond. The guy's super intelligent. He's 90 years old, but in better shape than me, and he travels by himself. And he reminded me, quoted me word for word on a conversation we had 20 years earlier. So the guy is intentionally lying about being completely oblivious to knowing that I was the guy who said we didn't go to the moon, which is proof he's lying, right? If he's lying about that, then he's a liar, right? He already admitted he would lie to his family, his children, his wife, his preacher, his congregation to satisfy the top secret clearance that he was given on the Apollo program. So, I mean, I guess because he has this, Christian seal of approval, we're supposed to, accept it. But like I said, 3/4 of the New Testament is rebuking the church. The book of Revelation, there's 7 churches, and 5 of them, the majority, are told if they don't repent, they're not going to heaven. So the odds are people who claim they're a Christian really aren't in their everyday life, and he's one of them. He's the only Apollo astronaut who claims to be a Christian. I guess that's part of his act, so that people, have to, take him at his word because he claims he's a Christian, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. And how do you think that overall that kind of debate went?
Well, it really wasn't a debate with Danny Jones constantly interrupting and answering the questions for him, with him coaching him in advance. It's not really a debate, uh, you know, but it was a conversation. You could call it a confrontation. And Charles Duke and I had a private talk afterwards. And I said, look, I understand you being reluctant to tell the truth if you think doing so will hurt people. The other Apollo astronauts, the reputation of America, things like that. And I could see him tearing up. I said, I understand that. The fact is, all of us, including him and me, need to be more concerned about what God thinks than what people think. And God abhors lies, especially a person whose life is built on it, and a reputation like the greatest accomplishment of mankind being a complete lie. My film on the homepage of Sibrel.com opens up with the Tower of Babel. And Jesus said to start a tower and to not finish it makes you proclaim yourself a fool to the world. The Tower of Babel was that. They started and they never finished. It was there for the whole world to see the rebuke. Then we show the first and biggest machine of the 20th century, a big ship called the Titanic, who put in print the ship that God himself could not sink. Tower of Babel never finished. Titanic never made one voyage. And then we show Richard Nixon, who knew they were not on the moon, who nevertheless said, putting a man on the moon is second in greatness only to God making the universe. That's a blasphemous statement. The other two rebukes have come out, and maybe this one will come out. Maybe the delay. The truth could have come out 6 weeks afterwards, and people, we would have been well over it by now, right? But imagine a couple on their 50th anniversary. One of them says, oh, by the way, in our first year of marriage, I was unfaithful. After they're the benevolent grandpa, after they're the elder in the church. You see, the impact is greater. A famous writer about the Tower of Babel said, the monument to their pride became a memorial to their folly. That could be said about the Apollo program. The monument to their pride became a memorial to their folly. From a secular point of view, I think they'll just keep postponing returning to the moon until a comet hits or a pandemic kills 1 out of 5 people. And then at that point, no one's going to care who killed JFK or if the moon landings are real or not. But from a spiritual point of view, maybe the truth will come out to rebuke mankind in the last days before it's too late, to show us how far we have fallen. Imagine if right now we're being tapped on the shoulder and everyone says, stop, you got to turn on the TV, and one of the astronauts is confessing. There would be dead silence throughout the world. You could hear a pin drop. It would be like the whole world, especially Americans, having a cold glass of water thrown in their face. They wake up, they realize they've been sleepwalking, and they look down and they're 1 foot away from a cliff. It would be a difficult reality, but a blessing in disguise, like popping a boil. Messy, but relief will come. We have to be able to tell the truth about this. If not, the liars have won. We can't have our greatest accomplishment be a lie and be an honorable nation. We have to deal with the past mistakes. And if we don't, we're destined for failure. And we're going to have God's rebuke. Earthquakes, meteors, pandemic, something is probably in the wings to rebuke America for faking the moon landing, among many other things. But faking the moon landing is symbolic and spiritual. When Nixon said it was second in greatness only to God making the universe, when it was a complete forgery. And I hope and pray the truth comes out. I hope and pray we have a political leader who loves what God thinks more than what man thinks, because we're all going to face death and have a judgment to come. And even if there was no God, you want to be remembered in secular history as a coward, afraid to tell the truth. So what can
There we go.
do?
Yeah, fascinating, truly fascinating. And yeah, I reckon I watched the Danny Jones interview. And what did you say? 10 times did Charlie Dukes ask you or say, why am I here? Basically. or I
Well,
never
about
knew.
5 times that I know of,
Yeah.
from my memory, it's about 5 times he acted like
Wow.
he was totally surprised that I was saying we
Mhm.
didn't go to the moon when he reminded me of it before the conversation began, and Danny Jones told him 10 times in advance that that was what the conversation would be about. So for him to act 5 times during the interview like he had no clue that was what was going on is just proof he's an intentional liar. That
Mhm.
was part of his act. So
Yeah.
why would he have to put on an act and lie about
Mhm.
having anything to do with the moon landings if they were real?
Yeah, I think you said he should get an Oscar for his
I
performance.
pretty good to the point where people have thought he was MK Ultra, and I'm sure
Mhm.
they considered hypnotizing people and tricking them into thinking they walked on the moon, but it's not reliable
Mhm.
hypnotism, and you really need an intelligent, coherent person to pull off a lie to this degree.
It,
So
yeah. Do
we
you
have
think that
proof
could
that
have
he was a
been?
liar.
Do you think that's possible that they, in their minds, they actually believe they did go?
No, I think people thought that because he's such a good liar.
Mhm.
But then again, Meryl Streep can tear up and pretend that her child is dying when it's really not. So he's a good liar to the point where people thought, well, he must actually believe it. No, he's just trained. And we have proof that he was intentionally lying by acting 5 times during the interview like he had no clue that I was the guy who said we didn't go to the moon when he knew it beforehand multiple times. So he was pretending, lying that he
Mhm.
didn't know I was the guy who said we didn't go to the moon. So he's lying about that with intention and forethought. And therefore, if he's there about the Apollo missions, he shouldn't have to lie about any of it. So if he's lying about that, then he's lying about the rest of it.
Yeah, yeah. To be fair, I would agree with that. And what's been the feedback that you've had from that interview?
Well, I did another interview prior to that, I think in March. So I did one in March and then in November on both on Danny Jones's podcast. I go by book sales, to see the response of a particular interview. The peak of the Joe Rogan interview compared to Candace Owens, compared to something else. I actually did more book sales this last time than the first time, which I thought it would be the other way around. Danny Jones' audience, for whatever reason, it seems like the majority of them think the moon missions are real, and they find it offensive to say otherwise. Joe Rogan just said he had a private conversation with Danny Jones, who admitted that he thinks the moon missions are fake. That's what he told me also. Uh, but I actually did more book sales after the interview with Charles Duke, and I thought it would be the other way around. People would think I'm picking on grandpa, you know. But the fact is, if someone did horrific crimes in World War II and they're in their, 90s, they're still war criminals, and you can still bring them to justice. It's not, disrespectful to someone who murdered people to bring them to trial, even if they're 90. You still have to show compassion for everybody, but that's the fear that he had and I had, that they're going to think I'm picking on grandpa, but grandpa's a traitor. I'm sorry, he is. He's still, being a traitor to this country with forethought and energy. He's flying, all the way, going through 2 airports because he has to defend this lie. Otherwise, he'll get caught, and he's doing it with great intention and forethought and detail. And I feel sorry for him. He is a traitor. He is a liar. Of course, I've lied, and I'm not, a perfect person or perfect Christian. I try, and I repent on a daily basis, and he needs to do the same.
Can I
Yeah,
ask you?
on you go, Sensum. Yeah.
I was just going to say, can I ask you about a very, very quick question, please? Well, it can be as quick or as short as you want it to be. But when we spoke last, you hadn't quite published the book Aliens from Planet X, Their Origin and Future Appearance. And, you know, literally a few weeks after we spoke the last time, that book was released, and I got it. I listen to a lot of my books, so I listen to things on Audible. And one of the most fascinating things to me is that book, like I say, is a couple of, well, you can tell us exactly how old it is, but it's a couple of years old now. And at the time, you were proffering the fact that the regime, as we like to call it, would use the threat of alien encounters, alien invasion to get everybody on board and online. And subsequently, you've been proven absolutely right, because we've seen it on Fox News, we've seen it on all of the mainstream media channels, where they've actually had government authorities stating, oh, even within the last sort of 3 to 5 weeks or so, saying that we've had alien encounters from 5 different species, or however they term it, and yet the wider public response has been absolute silence. Now, I know, I know 100% for sure that back in the 80s, had this been information been published, it would be literally be the world news for like months, if not weeks, if not months on end. And yet it happened, you know, even just before Christmas, where they're saying, "Oh yes, the government, the US government, that is, admits that we've probably been visited by at least 5 different alien species," and the entire world have just gone, "Yeah, whatever." It's like nobody cares. Can you? I think people became quite jaded with regards to the regime, particularly during the COVID era. But can you explain how the complete and utter apathy of how, you know, even when it is the so-called mainstream media outlets that are saying, oh yeah, there's definitely aliens out there and we've encountered them, and literally, you know, to do a colloquialism, nobody gives a shit. Can you explain that even remotely? Because, like I say, had this information come out or broke in the 80s, it literally would be the biggest story for the rest of the decade. And yet, recently, it's just been like, yeah, meh. It's like nobody cares. Nobody's interested. Can you square that circle at all?
Okay, well, I think when you talk about the 5 alien species, I think you're talking about Trump, Biden, Obama, Bush Jr., and Clinton. And that is very strange. And we have to be aware of their tentacles. If you go to Sibrel.com, S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL, Sibrel.com, scroll past the Moon Book if you've already read it. You're right. I have a new book called Aliens from Planet X. Now, both books are interactive. At the top of Sibrel.com, there are video links. It says Moonman video links and aliens/Planet X links. The latter book, the one about aliens, I think has 29 video links to back up everything that's in the book. This involves decades of research. I'm not a virologist. So, studying this little thing that went on in 2020, I interview people who are virologists and people who are executives at certain pharmaceutical companies. And their opinion becomes my opinion because they're the expert. If I want to know about the JFK assassination, I interview Robert Kennedy Jr., and then his opinion becomes my opinion. So I studied the research of the top 2 UFO researchers, Jacques Vallée and Alan Hynek. They both independently did about 4 decades of research. They came together and they had the exact same conclusion, which is number 1, UFOs are real. Number 2, they're not from outer space, they're from Earth. And number 3, they're demonic. Now, as I've said, I try my best to be a Christian. And I've read the Bible all the way through more than once. It's not a flattering book for people who say, you know, it's translated, by men, and they change it now. It's pretty bad. The greatest heroes in the Bible are adulterers and murderers, and I'm sure they would change that if they had the opportunity. And one of the things that it says in Genesis 6 is that fallen angels, a third of heaven, were kicked out, and that they interbred with humans. I think it's Leviticus 19:19. God says, "Do not crossbreed species." Again, this is in my alien book at Sibrel.com, and I have video links to back it up. Now, if you disobey that, GMO warning, right, and you take a horse and a donkey and you mate them to get a mule, the mule is sterile. The divine creator put that protection in if we disobey the crossbreeding prohibition. So the offspring of two species is sterile. So if you take a human and a fallen angel and they have a child, the Bible says it's called a Nephilim. The Nephilim is sterile. That's why during, quote, alien abductions, they harvest sperm and eggs. You see, that's the way they continue their species. The Bible says one of the reasons the flood happened was to destroy the Nephilim. When it says Noah was found pure in his generations, it literally means bloodline. And yet it says somehow, even though those 8 people were the only people who survived, that somehow the Nephilim survived after the flood, even though they weren't in the ark. I believe their fallen angel, parents who had great powers and technology protected them. We have these UFOs that come out of the ocean, which is a perfect place to hide. 70% of the earth is water. They can fly through the air and this, that, and the other. So maybe they were protected somehow. Let's just say they could go to the moon in 1969 on the first attempt, right? Imagine the technology you'd have 6,000 years later. So imagine 6,000 years of technological development from fallen angels who have been around for who knows how many thousands of years before them. And then you look at Genesis 3:15, where Satan comes in and messes things up. Little side note about the moon landing fraud. The sin that caused the fall of mankind wasn't adultery, it wasn't thievery, and it wasn't murder. It was a lie. Satan lied. You see, lies are different, and that's why this whole moon landing lie about the greatest accomplishment is so powerful. Well, it says when God rebukes Lucifer that he will put a war between the seed of Lucifer and the seed of Adam. Well, seed means future offspring. The future offspring of Adam, me and you, are at war with the future offspring of Lucifer, a fallen angel, who the Bible says produced a species called the Nephilim that were giants that somehow survived after the flood. So the book at Sibrel.com, Aliens from Planet X, studies this bloodline. I do the research of other researchers. That's how you get facts quicker. There is a researcher, a high school student, and she went through 500,000 genealogical descendants of all the American presidents at the time of the study and said all of them are blood related except one. There's literally 2 bloodlines, just like Genesis 3:15 says, right? There's the bloodline of the Luciferian and the bloodline of Adam. They control both political parties. It's so easy to do so. Vote for, Nephilim Luciferian candidate blue or Nephilim Luciferian candidate red, and they don't care. They want the most popular one to win. Then one of the videos at Sibrel.com shows that 666 is actually in logos hidden in plain sight. It's in the logo of Google, 666 around that circle. It's in the World Economic Forum, the people who claim they appoint world leaders to every government. There's a half circle going through the O in World, O in Economic, O in form, and it forms a 666. There's a 666 in CERN, trying to open another dimension to potentially let fallen angels in. I know it's hard to believe that you have all these world leaders giving the sign of the devil, the hand sign of the devil, throughout many pictures and videos. And yet, I guess people worship Lucifer. I know it sounds hard, but I find it hard to believe that someone would rape a child, but apparently people are doing it. And apparently people are worshiping Lucifer. And so the first half of the book goes into the biblical and historic and now modern proof that there are fallen angels influencing life on earth, and they are disguising themselves as aliens from another planet, which can never be proved. You say you're from some, star system 300 million light years away. How can you prove it or disprove it? And get this, I think it's in Isaiah 14. It says Lucifer wants to ascend to the throne of God and become God. So this TV show that I thought was a one-time special, one-time documentary, Ancient Aliens, right? Apparently it's been around for 20 years. And their mantra is that we were made by aliens. And the reason why that film series started, it started the very year a 10-year study came to a conclusion. And that was a DNA study called the Eve Project, where they took blood samples from all nations under Earth, and they were able, taking Africans, Eskimos, Swedes, Americans, tracing it backwards in time through DNA technology, and they came to the same conclusion that the Bible did. They said every human being on earth came from one woman. No one before her, no evolution. She suddenly appeared, just like the Bible says. So the very next year, they come up with this, excuse for that says, okay, that's true. We got the science, but we weren't made by God. That first woman was put here from aliens from outer space. Now, they never asked the question a single time in 20 years. What I would ask as a third grader, okay, if we were made by aliens, then who made the aliens? And if aliens are really fallen angels and their leader is Lucifer, what they're really saying is exactly what uh, Isaiah 14 says, that Lucifer wants to become God. What they're saying is mankind was made by Lucifer instead of God. And all of our world leaders are doing the devil hand sign and are part of those organizations that have 666 hidden in plain sight in their logo. Go to Sibrel.com and look at it. And then the second half of the book is about rogue planets and how a passing rogue planet may come by in the near future. And even though the aliens have been here all along, they will lie with misdirection and claim they came from this world, and that's why they're suddenly appearing. Von Braun, who faked the moon landing, said the federal government is going to fake an alien invasion. Now, how many congressional hearings are going on about who killed JFK? Zero. How many congressional hearings are going on about 9/11, 3,000 architects and engineers saying it was explosives? None. How many congressional hearings are going on after two NBC news directors agree that I have proof that the moon missions are fake? None. How many congressional hearings are going on about aliens from outer space? Oh, well, why are those congressional hearings going on? Because they want us to believe in them. They leak out, this military source says this or that or the other. And so they're holding the hearings not because they're interested in the truth, because they want us to believe the lie. It's coming from the same government that killed their own president and faked the moon landing. Come on, people.
Yeah. Have you got a follow-up question to that, Sensum, or maybe he's fell asleep?
Yeah.
You're
Well, in
on.
any case,
You're
in any
muted.
case,
You're muted, Sensum. I don't know. He's maybe got a technical issue. It happens usually to me, to be fair. But yeah, so that would be that Planet X, or Nemesis, some people call it, maybe.
that's right.
Yeah.
And apparently, prior to 705 BC, the earth had a 360-day year. The Hebrew calendar is 360 days. That's why there's 360 days on a compass, or 360 degrees on a compass, you see? Because originally the earth had a 360-day year, which meant it had 12 months that were exactly 30 days each. Now, how could you argue against divine creation? If our solar system had 12 months, 12 tribes of Israel, and each month was exactly 30 days, that could not happen by accident. There would be proof of divine creation right there for all to see. But according to the Bible, God uses constellations, stars, and planets as symbols for things. Planet X, I believe, is the symbol for Lucifer, the most powerful telescope in the world, run by the Vatican's Jesuits, is called the Lucifer telescope. How about that? And one of their disavowed former members says they're tracking an object that's going to have a significant part in world history in the last days. I believe they're tracking planet Lucifer, which came by the Earth in 705 BC, pulled the Earth slightly farther away from the sun, changing the year from 360 days to 365 and a quarter, destroying the testimony of God's creation. And if it comes by the Earth again, I believe in Isaiah 13:13, which is about the last days, says that the world, the earth, will be moved out of its place. It may be pulled again away from the sun into an elliptical orbit that would cause very hot summers, very cold winters. It could be the instrument of the tribulation. Jesus says that one of the signs of the end of the world is the tossing and the turning of the seas. Planet X is estimated to be 30 times bigger than the moon, which causes tides to go in and out 20 feet every day. So if it's 30 times bigger than that, that would cause the tossing and the turning of the seas. So the second half is about Planet X, how a rogue planet may be coming by in the near future. And even though it's a dead world, if it comes by, that would be the perfect opportunity for aliens, fallen angels, to reveal themselves, because they could claim the planet passing by as their spaceship, even though they've actually been here all along.
Fascinating. I find that interesting. I've heard quite a lot about the Planet X in the past, and I've seen different stuff, but none of it I could really kind of confirm or was substantial. But yeah, I've heard a lot about it. I have not read that book yet, but I'm sure I've got it. I bought it on Audible. I'm sure Sensum had bought it as well. So we've both got them. Yeah, I find Planet X an interesting one. So do you reckon, what would that, if it did come close, what sort of, would it be a pole shift sort of scenario?
Well, it could cause the Earth to tilt. It wouldn't really cause the poles to shift in and of itself. It could tilt the Earth dramatically. It could pull the Earth further away from the sun. It could cause the magnetic field to change. It could cause earthquakes. It could cause meteor storms. It would be, as Jesus said, the greatest tribulation in the history of the world would be all happening at once. The Bible says in the last days that the kings and rulers of the world will go into caves and holes in the ground to escape what is coming upon the whole earth. And that's exactly what's going on. These rich people are building bunkers, and the military has recently reopened Cheyenne Mountain, right? As a bunker for something coming upon the whole world. So I believe that's going to happen. We're probably going to have an asteroid strike before then, probably in April of 2029 off the coast of San Diego. There's a YouTube video that I have at my YouTube channel about that. Just go to Sibrel.com, scroll down to the bottom. And I believe we're living in the last days. And when you have biblical prophecy and scientific discoveries saying the exact same thing, I'd say that it's very likely these events are going to happen.
And do you think we're already maybe seeing the effects of what some people might deem effects from Nemesis or Planet X? Do you know, increased earthquakes and extreme weather events? Could that be? Would you link that to, or?
I don't know. Climate change happens all the time. A lot of people believe we're about to enter a cold period because of the sunspot cycle, going through the Marauder minimum, which is a cycle of 11-year cycle. So there's a multiple 11-year cycle, and they believe we're going to enter a colder period coming up. Basically, when the Earth gets too hot, which it has been doing, it triggers mechanisms that cool it off. And when it gets too cold, it triggers mechanisms that warms it back up. And it kind of goes through this up and down cycle over hundreds and thousands of years. And the greatest scientists right now believe that we're about to enter a cold phase for most of mankind. And I believe we're living in the last days. And so maybe Planet X, meteor storm, an asteroid strike, those things are mentioned in the book of Revelation. And in particular, America should be on guard. They're the ones who faked the moon landing, which is a blasphemous event from a spiritual point of view. And people have to realize that the faking of the moon landing is more profound historically than if they had actually went. That's one of the greatest truths and moment in history, as the United States was so immature and arrogant that they would not admit they couldn't keep Kennedy's goal. So they falsified it and murdered people to keep it a secret and tricked their own people into defending it. If you have a world leader, American leader, who really wants to reform the government, tell the people the moon missions are fake. It would be the most powerful tool to get their support to reform the government. And if that's not done, then the people who lied, they've won. And we know that that's going to end badly.
Yeah, yep, definitely. And it's kind of hard to, do you know, even I think for someone who maybe wouldn't, let's say, believe in the likes of good and evil or Satan, if you like, it would be kind of hard to argue against it when you look at the world that we're in today and what's going on in the world that we're in. I mean, the world is in a bad, bad way, right? Would you agree with that?
Yep. I think in the book of Timothy, it says there will be terrible times in the last days. And it describes what is so terrible about the last days. And it doesn't say earthquakes. It doesn't say meteor storms. It says people will be lovers of themselves, boastful, arrogant, proud, disobedient to parents, selfish, unloving, and unforgiving. God said, I desire mercy, not religion. And Jesus said, which makes me believe he's not of this world, love your enemy. You have the Muslims bombing the Jews bombing the Muslims, and the so-called Christian United States bombing everybody else. Nobody is loving their enemy. That is proof that you're really a believer in God. And that's what the Bible warns. In the last days, people will be unloving and unforgiving. And the Bible warns, Matthew 6:15, if we do not forgive other people, then our sins will not be forgiven. And your sins have to be forgiven in order to enter eternal life. So the next life is what's really important. Repent, be baptized, stay repentant, and God will give you all the grace you need. And the moon landing fraud is just proof that we live in a fallen world and a fallen nation, to the degree that naive people still defend it, despite blatant proof that they did falsify it.
Yeah, and did you? I know that's probably about time up now, unless that was the CIA trying to get a hold of you.
Well, I got to actually replace the pacemaker batteries. There we go.
Good man.
Yeah, I got to be going soon, but if you
Yeah,
would, please send me a link to the interview, and I might share it at some point with your
cool.
permission on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think you done that before, which was great. You said that because I think this weekend they're planning on doing a test simulation of the rocket, and then I think the window for going is sometime in February. So, do you reckon they'll just cancel? Come up with a reason to cancel it, delay it? Because I think the next window is 2032 or something like that. Something stupid, anyway. But so you reckon? Because I mean, they've done it the what 50+ years now. You reckon they'll just say, "Oh, cancelled again," and put it on the back burner, or do you think they'll actually fake it again?
I don't know. I do know they've said they're going to return to walking on the moon 10 times. They said we're going to do it in 5 years. Trump said it. And here we are more than 5 years later, and they can't even orbit the moon. In 2014, they said they would have people orbiting the moon in 2018, and 4 years behind schedule, they only had mannequins. So after the United States sent their first astronaut into outer space, Kennedy said we would walk on the moon in 8 years, and we walked on the moon in 8 years with 1960s technology, 1/millionth the computing power of a cell phone. So 50 years later, they said they're going to have people orbiting the moon in 2014. If they do it in 2026, that's still 12 years instead of 8 years, 50% longer, with 5 decades better technology, to only do about 1/10 of the mission, which is simply to orbit the moon and come back. You see how that doesn't make sense? Even if they were to do it, I have no idea whether they're going to fake it, postpone it, or do it somehow. Who knows what will happen?
Yeah, yep. I guess today it's a wee bit different with the whole deep fake fucking AI scenario. So, I mean, would people be able to tell if it was fake or not? I'm
Well,
unsure.
you'd have to get people to participate. That'd be the harder part. They could fake it. They could make it real, and people would say it was fake. They could fake it, and people could say it was real. That's not the hard part. The hard part is getting people, astronauts, to participate in another fraud to that degree. That's going to be the hard part. To have people who are true patriots of America become traitors. And I'm not sure they can find enough people to do that anymore.
Yeah, interesting. Always fascinating. Anytime I've talked to you in the interviews that I've watched you in the past. Well, in particular, the Joe Rogan and the one with Charlie Duke. As funny as I found some of it, I thought it was really good, and I think you done a great job. In particular with Joe Rogan, because I felt you got a really hard time from him, undeservedly. I mean, it's any interview I watched with Joe Rogan, he was never constantly saying, "Look, devil's advocate," or what did he, Steelman? I'm just going to steel man this. I'm going to steel man this, Steelman this, Steelman that, constantly over and over. But you kind of held your ground, and like you said, maybe being tired played in played in your favor a wee bit because I don't
Yeah.
know.
So,
I might have lost my cool, to be fair.
well, it is what it is. They did fake the moon landing, and it's still not a part of the record, and it needs to be in order for the nation to progress.
Yep, yep. Good man. Great having you on again, Bart, and
Sure.
we'll keep in touch, and hopefully, we can get you on again. Is there any big sort of interviews coming up, or books or anything like that you've got in the plan?
Well, I'm trying to produce my first feature film. It's starring Kevin Sorbo, and he's also the producer. And it's a fictionalized spiritual fantasy, I would call it. And hopefully, I'll become a feature filmmaker, and I'll never talk about the moon landing fraud ever again. So please pray for that. We're trying to raise $3 million, I think PayPal will accept a $3 million donation, and I'll give you half the proceeds from the film. So there
Yeah.
you go.
Good man, good man. So are you working on that currently?
Yes, that's what we're working on. We have the
Right.
script done, we have the
Mhm.
budget done, and I just finished my version of the pitch deck, and we're adding music and photographs to that as we speak.
Cool. Well, and you reckon maybe this year would it be, or
We're planning on releasing it, the Lord willing, in 2027. So
right?
we'd have to film it either this year or in the spring of next year. Right now, we're trying to raise $3 million, which isn't a whole lot. The average film cost 85 million.
Hmm.
And so most films break even. So if we produce something for 3 million and make 85 million, I think the investors would be very happy.
Yeah. And just finally, and I'll let you go. Do you think you could ever kind of come away from this sort of research, or do you think you'll always be attached to it? And do you know?
Well, if I become a feature filmmaker and I start making one film after another, I would gladly never talk about the moon landing fraud ever again. I'll let my book and film speak for myself.
Cool, good man. But I think it might be harder than you think to come away from it.
Oh, I
But in
don't know.
saying that, you've done it for a long, long time, and I've got a lot of time and respect for you, and thank you again, and we'll stay in touch and
All
hopefully get
righty.
you on
God
again.
bless.
God bless. I'm unsure. I think Sensum might be. Are you there, Sensum, or I don't know? Maybe his batteries have run out.
All righty. Well,
Right. Oh, take care, Bart. All the best. There's Bart. It's great to have Bart back on, and yeah, I reckon that would have been the fourth time that I've had Bart. I think the last time me and Sensum interviewed him, and then three times before that, we talked about the Apollo. I think the first time I had him on was 2020, and we talked about the whole COVID scenario, and of course it got a strike. But we covered so much. I think the one that got a strike, I did appeal it recently, and I never got it back, which is interesting because I appealed about 20 videos, and I got about 19. Well, maybe not 19, about 18, possibly 19 videos back, but one or two I never got back, and one of them was the Bart Sibrel. But I believe the rest of them are there to be watched, and Bart did upload the last one as well. So you can check that out. And I did link it in Sibrel.com, and I did link in Bart's YouTube as well. If I remember correctly. Look, it's late. It's late. Give me a break. So what I'll do is I'll call it a night, and hopefully everybody can catch me. I will be back. What day are we on? For Friday, we'd be now. Yeah, possibly Saturday. So hopefully I'll catch you all on Saturday, and thank you for everyone who tuned in, engaged, what have you. Like I say, whatever, wherever, do not comply. And that is about it. Bye bye.